A VIP lounge manager just burned an $8,700 boarding pass right in front of its owner. She looked at his faded jeans, his old hoodie, his worn sneakers, and decided he was a fraud. She called him an imposter. She humiliated him in front of dozens of passengers. She even confiscated his black card, claiming it was stolen. The crowd applauded her. But here is what she did not know. The man standing quietly in front of her, watching his documents turn to ashes, owned 67% of the entire airline. She had just burned her own boss's ticket. And now, with thousands watching live online, she was about to discover the true cost of her assumptions. What happens next will change everything you think about judging people by their appearance. It was a Tuesday afternoon at Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport in Arizona. Thousands of travelers moved through the corridors, each carrying their own stories. Among them walked a man who looked entirely unremarkable, yet whose presence would soon transform this ordinary day into something extraordinary. Keanu Reeves made his way through the terminal with the easy stride of someone who had learned long ago that true wealth had nothing to do with appearances. He wore faded blue jeans, a well-worn black hoodie with sleeves slightly frayed at the cuffs, and white sneakers showing signs of countless miles traveled. Over his shoulder hung a simple canvas backpack. In his hand, he carried a printed boarding pass and an elegant cream-colored envelope bearing an official corporate seal. No one gave him a second glance, and that was precisely how he preferred it. The VIP first-class lounge of Pacific Horizon Airlines occupied the upper level of Terminal 4. Beyond the frosted glass doors lay Italian marble floors, deep leather armchairs, a premium bar, and floor-to-ceiling windows with views of aircraft on the tarmac. In the far corner was the smoking lounge, a smaller room with comfortable seating and small tables holding crystal ashtrays and elegant silver lighters. Victoria Ashford stood near the entrance, surveying her domain. At 42 years old, she wore her position as VIP lounge manager like a crown. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun. Her tailored black suit cost more than some people earned in a week, and diamond studs glittered in her ears. In 4 years and 7 months at this job, Victoria had seen thousands of passengers pass through daily. So many faces had blurred together that she had stopped looking at them entirely. Why bother? Faces told you nothing, but clothing never lied. A single glance at someone's outfit told her everything. She needed to know about whether they belonged. The frosted glass doors slid open. Keanu stepped inside and began walking toward the reception desk. Victoria intercepted him immediately. Her eyes traveled from his worn sneakers up his faded jeans, paused disapprovingly on his hoodie, and stopped at his collar. She never looked at his face. The clothes had already told her everything. "Excuse me, sir." Her voice carried cool authority. "This is the first-class lounge. The economy waiting area is on the lower level." "Actually, I have a first-class ticket." Keanu held up his boarding pass with a gentle smile. Victoria took it and walked to the verification terminal. The scanner beeped. The screen displayed the details in crisp blue. K. Reeves. First class. Phoenix to Tokyo Narita. Confirmed. She stared at the screen. A system glitch. A hacked reservation. Identity theft. There had to be an explanation, because this disheveled man could not possibly have purchased an $8,700 ticket legitimately. She turned back to him. "The system shows a confirmation," she said slowly, "but I need additional verification. This ticket costs $8,700. "Of course. What would you like to see?" "Documentation proving your identity and ability to afford this." Keanu withdrew the cream-colored envelope from his pocket. In the corner, embossed in gold, was the Pacific Horizon Airlines logo. An official invitation to a board meeting at company headquarters in Tokyo. Victoria took it skeptically. She read the letter on official company letterhead with watermarks and an embossed seal. It referenced an emergency board meeting, international route expansion, and a figure that made her pause. $47 million. addressed to K. Reeves. For a moment, something flickered in her expression. But admitting she was wrong would mean her entire system was flawed. Her mind found a different explanation. Her expression shifted from skeptical to accusatory. "This is very serious," she said loudly, attracting nearby attention. "You are attempting to use a fraudulent ticket and you have forged official company documents. This is a federal offense." Several passengers turned to watch. A woman in her 60s wearing Chanel set down her champagne glass. A businessman in Brooks Brothers looked up from his laptop. Victoria addressed them directly. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this disturbance. We have a fraudulent passenger with fake documents. I am handling it." She gripped Keanu's elbow and walked him toward the smoking lounge. He allowed himself to be led without resistance, his expression a mixture of curiosity and sad recognition. Inside the smoking lounge, roughly 15 passengers occupied the leather chairs. Victoria stopped in the center where everyone could see. She held up the boarding pass in one hand and the letter in the other. "I want everyone to witness what happens when someone tries to defraud Pacific Horizon Airlines," she declared. "This man walked in wearing thrift store clothes and a cheap backpack, expecting us to believe he belongs here." The channel woman, Miriam Holloway, nodded approvingly. "Absolutely right. Standards exist for a reason." Preston Whitmore, the Brooks Brothers businessman, added from near the window. "Should have stopped him at the door. One look at those sneakers, and you know he does not belong." Victoria picked up an elegant silver lighter from a nearby table. "This," she announced, holding up the boarding pass, "is a fraudulent ticket." The lighter sparked. She touched the flame to the paper. It caught immediately, fire spreading fast. She held the burning document high, turning so everyone could witness. "This is how Pacific Horizon Airlines handles fraud. We destroy the evidence and protect our legitimate customers." The boarding pass burned bright orange, curling into ash. Fragments drifted down onto the marble floor, some settling on Keanu's worn sneakers. Keanu stood motionless, watching his ticket transform into carbon. His expression remained calm, like someone watching a storm from safe shelter. Victoria was not finished. "And this," she continued, holding up the letter, "is even more serious. Forging company documents is criminal." She touched the lighter to the letter. The heavy paper resisted briefly, then caught. Flames consumed words about board meetings and $47 million. She let it fall to join the ashes on the floor. "Problem solved," she announced, brushing her hands together. Quick, decisive, and public. Miriam Holloway applauded lightly. "Bravo, Victoria. Exactly the decisive action we need." Preston Whitmore raised his glass. "I will write a commendation to the airline." Finally, someone with backbone. Other passengers murmured agreement. Several filmed with their phones. Victoria turned to Keanu with contempt. "Now you stay right here until I decide what to do with you." Keanu stood quietly amid the ashes. His phone buzzed insistently in his pocket. Somewhere in Tokyo, executives waited for a meeting scheduled to begin in 15 minutes. A $47 million decision hung in the balance. None of these people knew any of that. They saw only what they expected. A fraud exposed. Keanu glanced at his watch, then at the ashes at his feet. A small smile crossed his face. Victoria noticed and frowned. In her world, a man in his position should be panicking. "What is so funny?" she demanded. Keanu met her eyes directly. "Nothing," he said quietly. "Just thinking about assumptions and how expensive they can be." Victoria's frown deepened. Something felt wrong. But she pushed the feeling aside. She was Victoria Ashford, VIP lounge manager. She knew how to read people by their appearance, and this man was exactly what she had identified him to be. A fraud, an imposter, someone who did not belong. The ashes settled silently on the marble floor. The other passengers watched, phones still recording, waiting to see what would happen next. Victoria had no idea that her comfortable certainties were about to crumble completely. Victoria was not satisfied with simply burning the documents. The flames had given her a taste of power, and she wanted more. She wanted to expose this imposter completely, to demonstrate to everyone watching just how thorough and competent she truly was. Now, she said, stepping closer to Keanu with predatory confidence. Let me see that backpack. Who knows what other fake items you are carrying in there? She did not wait for permission. Before Keanu could respond, she had already grabbed the canvas strap and pulled the backpack from his shoulder. She carried it to a nearby table and began emptying its contents in front of everyone, treating it like evidence at a crime scene. The passengers in the smoking lounge watched with fascination as Victoria rifled through his belongings. Some leaned forward in their seats. Others raised their phones higher to capture every moment. From the backpack, Victoria extracted item after item. A worn paperback novel with a cracked spine and dog-eared pages. A small leather journal filled with handwritten notes. A phone that buzzed and vibrated constantly with incoming messages. And then, from an interior pocket, something that caught the light. Victoria held it up triumphantly. An American Express Centurion card, the legendary black card, issued only to those whose extraordinary wealth qualified them for invitation to one of the world's most exclusive financial products. Fewer than 100,000 people in the entire world held such a card. Her lip curled into a sneer. Look at this, everyone, she announced, holding the card high above her head so the entire room could see. A black card. Do you know how rare these are? Only the ultra-wealthy even know they exist. Billionaires, CEOs, royalty. She gestured dismissively at Keanu's hoodie and faded jeans. And this man, dressed like he just came from a homeless shelter, expects us to believe this belongs to him. She dropped the card into her jacket pocket with a decisive motion. Confiscated, she declared. This is clearly stolen property. When the police arrive, they will want to trace who the real owner is. Some poor soul probably had their wallet stolen and does not even know it yet. Keanu watched his card disappear into her pocket. His expression remained unchanged, that same strange calm that had not wavered since the confrontation began. Victoria pulled out her radio and spoke into it with crisp authority. Security to the first-class VIP lounge immediately. We have a fraud suspect here. Attempted use of fake tickets, forged company documents, and possession of stolen credit cards. I need backup and police notification. The radio crackled with acknowledgement. Within 2 minutes, 2 uniformed security officers pushed through the glass doors of the smoking lounge. Officer Douglas was tall, with graying temples, and the weathered look of someone who had seen everything in his 15 years of airport security. Officer Perry was younger and stockier, his hand instinctively resting near the equipment on his belt. Victoria stepped forward to greet them, gesturing toward Keanu with one hand while the other rested confidently on her hip. Officers, thank you for responding so quickly. This individual attempted to enter the first-class lounge with fraudulent documents. I destroyed the fake ticket and forged letter for evidence preservation. He is also carrying a stolen black card, which I have secured. She patted her jacket pocket. Officer Douglas looked at the ash pile on the marble floor, then at Keanu standing calmly nearby, then at Victoria's triumphant expression. Something about the scene felt slightly off, but he could not identify exactly what. Sir, he said to Keanu, please remain where you are. We need to sort this out. Of course, Keanu replied. His voice was quiet and steady. I am happy to cooperate. Officer Perry positioned himself on Keanu's other side while his partner took notes. The 2 security officers now flanked the man in the worn hoodie, creating a visual that delighted Victoria immensely. You see, she announced to the watching passengers, this is how we handle these situations. Swift, professional, decisive. Miriam Holloway had moved further away from Keanu, as if proximity to him might somehow contaminate her channel suit. She nodded approvingly at Victoria. Exactly right, she said. The quality of service these days has declined so much because people like him think they can go anywhere. It is refreshing to see someone maintain proper standards. Preston Whitmore raised his whiskey glass in agreement. I am definitely writing a 5-star review for this lounge. The staff here understands how to protect the experience for real customers. Behind the main reception desk in the lounge, a young woman watched the entire scene unfold with growing unease. Her name was Chloe Martinez, 26 years old, and she had worked at Pacific Horizon Airlines for only 8 months. Unlike Victoria, who had long ago stopped looking at faces, Chloe had a different habit. She actually looked at people. And something about this situation was bothering her. She studied the man standing between the two security officers. Yes, his clothes were worn and casual. Yes, his backpack looked cheap. But there were other details that did not fit Victoria's narrative. His sneakers were old, but Chloe recognized the subtle craftsmanship of Italian leather. His watch, partially visible beneath his hoodie sleeve, had the elegant simplicity of an expensive Swiss chronograph. And the way he stood, the way he carried himself despite being surrounded and accused, it was not the posture of a desperate fraud. It was the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. Chloe approached Victoria hesitantly. Ms. Ashford, she said softly, maybe we should verify a few more details before the police arrive. Perhaps call the corporate office to confirm whether that letter was legitimate. Victoria turned on her sharply. Quiet, Chloe. You have been here 8 months. I have been doing this job for almost 5 years. I know how to identify frauds. I have processed hundreds of thousands of passengers. Do you really think I cannot tell the difference between a real first-class customer and an imposter? But his watch looks expensive, Chloe pressed gently. And the way he is acting, he does not seem worried at all. Most people in his situation would be panicking. Victoria's eyes narrowed. That is exactly what makes him dangerous. Professional con artists stay calm. They are trained to appear confident even when caught. The fact that he is not panicking just proves how experienced he is at this kind of deception. She turned away from Chloe dismissively. Go back to the desk. Let the adults handle this. Chloe retreated, but she kept watching. Something was very wrong here. She could feel it. Meanwhile, more passengers had gathered to witness the spectacle. Several had been filming since the document burning, and one young man had already uploaded a clip to social media with the caption describing dramatic airport justice. The video was being shared rapidly. 200 views. 500, 800. The numbers climbed steadily. Comments flooded in, most of them supporting Victoria. Finally, someone standing up to these scammers. This is what airport security should look like. That manager deserves a raise. Victoria basked in the attention. This was her finest moment. She had identified a fraud, destroyed his fake documents, confiscated his stolen property, and summoned the authorities. Everything had gone exactly according to her system. She turned back to Keanu, emboldened by the crowd's approval. Do you have anything to say for yourself? She demanded. Before the police arrive and you have to explain all of this to them. Keanu looked at her calmly. I think there has been a serious misunderstanding here, he said quietly. Victoria laughed, a sharp and dismissive sound. A misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding is that you thought you could fool me. She stepped closer, her voice rising so everyone could hear. I have dealt with hundreds of people like you. People who put on cheap clothes, carry canvas bags, and think they can sneak into spaces meant for successful people. You know how much a first-class ticket costs? $8,700. That is probably more than you make in 6 months. She gestured around the elegant lounge. This space is for people who have earned the right to be here, people who work hard, people who achieve things, not people who try to cheat their way in with fake documents and stolen credit cards. Preston Whitmore nodded vigorously. She is absolutely right. These imposters ruin the experience for everyone. Miriam Holloway added her voice. The service quality everywhere has gone down because we keep letting the wrong people into the wrong places. Standards matter. The video views continued climbing. 1,000, 1,200, 1,500. The comments section filled with people praising Victoria's decisive action. Keanu stood silently through all of this, absorbing every word, every accusation, every assumption. His phone continued buzzing in Victoria's confiscated pile of his belongings. Messages from people waiting for him. A board meeting starting without him. $47 million in decisions being delayed. He glanced down at the ashes on the floor. The remains of his boarding pass and the official letter lay scattered across the pristine marble like dark confetti. Documents that had cost the company time and resources to prepare. Documents that had been destroyed based on nothing more than the clothes he chose to wear. For a brief moment, a small smile crossed his face. It was the smile of someone who knew something that no one else in the room knew. A secret that was about to change everything. Victoria noticed the smile and her irritation flared. "You think this is funny?" she snapped. "You are about to be arrested for fraud and theft, and you are smiling." Keanu looked up at her. His dark eyes held no anger, no fear, no desperation, only a kind of patient certainty. He checked his watch one more time. 10 minutes until his board meeting was supposed to start. 10 minutes until executives in Tokyo would begin wondering where their chairman was. "All right," he said calmly, his voice cutting through the noise of the watching crowd. "I think it is time to clear up this misunderstanding." Victoria crossed her arms, her expression smug. "Oh, really? And how exactly do you plan to do that? Your fake documents are ashes. Your stolen card is in my pocket. The police are on their way. What could you possibly say that would change anything?" Keanu reached slowly toward the pile of his belongings on the table. Both security officers tensed, watching his movement carefully. "May I?" he asked politely, gesturing toward his items. Officer Douglas hesitated, then nodded. "Go ahead." Slowly. Keanu looked at her calmly. "All right," he said quietly. "I think it is time to clear up this misunderstanding." He reached slowly toward the pile of his belongings on the table. Victoria crossed her arms, her expression smug. "And how exactly do you plan to do that? Your documents are ashes. Your stolen card is in my pocket. The police are coming." Keanu's hand found what he was looking for. Victoria had no idea that everything was about to change. The tablet screen glowed to life in Keanu's hands. His fingers moved across the surface with the practiced ease of someone who had used this system countless times before, navigating through layers of security that no ordinary passenger would ever have access to. Victoria watched with smug confidence. Whatever trick he was about to attempt, it would only dig his hole deeper. "That is probably some fake app you downloaded," she announced to the watching crowd. "These scammers are getting more sophisticated every day. They create fake banking apps, fake corporate portals, anything to make their lies seem believable." Keanu did not respond. He simply continued entering his credentials, then pressed his thumb against the screen for biometric verification. The device processed for a moment, then displayed a new screen with an official header. Corporate Board Portal. Pacific Horizon Airlines. Restricted access. He turned the tablet so that Officer Douglas could see clearly. The security officer leaned forward, his professional skepticism giving way to confusion as he read the information displayed on the screen. Keanu Reeves. Founder and principal owner. Pacific Horizon Airlines Holdings. Ownership stake 67%. Position chairman of the board. Member since 2016. Security clearance level 10. Full executive access. Officer Douglas's face went pale. His hand, which had been resting near his equipment belt, dropped limply to his side. "Perry," he said quietly to his partner, "you need to see this." Officer Perry stepped closer, looked at the screen, and his expression transformed from professional alertness to something approaching horror. The radio slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers, clattering against the marble floor with a sound that echoed through the now silent lounge. Victoria pushed forward, trying to see the screen. "That is fake," she insisted, though her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. Anyone can create a fake app. Anyone can make a screen that says whatever they want it to say. Keanu looked at her calmly. You think so? Let me show you something else. He navigated to another section of the corporate system, the personnel database. His fingers typed quickly, searching for a specific name. Victoria Ashford. The screen populated with information, official company records complete with her employee photograph, hire date, and performance history. Keanu began to read aloud, his voice clear and steady. Victoria Ashford, employee ID 7782, position VIP Lounge Manager, Phoenix Sky Harbor, hired May 3, 2020, annual salary $89,000. Direct Supervisor, Regional Manager Theodore Grant. Emergency contact, Daniel Ashford, spouse. He looked up from the tablet directly into Victoria's eyes. You have been working for me for 4 years and 7 months, Victoria. The color drained from her face. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. From the back of the smoking lounge, a middle-aged man who had been quietly watching suddenly stepped forward. He had been sitting near the bar, nursing a bourbon, when the commotion started. Now he stared at Keanu with wide eyes. Wait a minute, he said loudly. Wait just a minute. Keanu Reeves, the actor Keanu Reeves. He moved closer, studying Keanu's face with the intensity of someone trying to confirm a suspicion. Oh my God, he exclaimed. It is you. I have seen John Wick at least 10 times. I knew you looked familiar, but I could not place it because of the casual clothes and the context. The news spread through the lounge like wildfire. Passengers who had been filming turned their phones toward each other, whispering urgently. Did he say Keanu Reeves? The actor owns this airline. How is that possible? Victoria's face cycled through emotions. Confusion, denial. The slow, creeping horror of recognition. No, she stammered. That cannot be right. Keanu Reeves is an actor. He makes movies. He does not own airlines. Keanu's expression remained patient, almost gentle. I invested in Pacific Horizon Airlines in 2016, he explained. I keep my ownership private because I prefer to experience the service as a regular customer would. I visit VIP lounges unannounced once a month to see how staff treat passengers when they think no one important is watching. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle over the room. Today, I was flying to Tokyo to finalize an international route expansion deal worth $47 million. The letter you burned was the official summons for an emergency board meeting. The boarding pass you burned was my ticket on my own airline. He looked down at the ashes still scattered across the marble floor. You burned your employer's documents, Victoria, right in front of dozens of witnesses and thousands of people watching online. Victoria's knees seemed to weaken. She reached out to steady herself against a nearby chair. The video views had exploded. 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. The comments section had transformed from praise for Victoria into shock and disbelief. He owns the airline. This is the greatest plot twist I have ever seen. That manager is so finished. Miriam Holloway, who had been so vocal in her support just minutes earlier, began edging toward the exit. Her Channel suit suddenly felt like a costume, her earlier words echoing in her memory as evidence of her own poor judgment. Preston Whitmore stared at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The whiskey glass in his hand trembled slightly. But Keanu was not finished. There is something else, he said, navigating to another section of the corporate database. Something that concerns me even more than what happened today. He opened a file labeled Customer Complaint Records and searched for Victoria's name. In the past 2 years, he read aloud, there have been 14 formal complaints filed against you, Victoria. 14 different passengers who felt they were treated unfairly. He scrolled through the records. March of last year, a retired teacher was refused service because you said she was dressed inappropriately for the first-class lounge. July, a software engineer was asked to prove his income before being allowed to sit down. November, a nurse who had just finished a 12-hour shift was told that this lounge is not for people like you. He looked up, All 14 complaints have one thing in common. Every single passenger was judged not by their ticket or their reservation, but by their appearance, by their clothes, by your assumptions about what a first-class customer should look like. The silence in the room was absolute. No one moved. No one spoke. Victoria's earlier confidence had completely evaporated. She stood trembling, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. "Mr. Reeves," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sir, I did not know. I was just doing my job. I was trying to protect the lounge from people who do not belong." Keanu's voice remained calm, but there was a weight to his words now. "Doing your job. Your job is to burn passengers' documents. Your job is to humiliate people based on the clothes they wear." He stepped closer to her. "You did not recognize me because you never look at faces, Victoria. You only look at clothes. And based on clothes alone, you decide who deserves respect and who does not." He turned to address the entire room, his voice carrying clearly to every corner. "This is not just about me. I happen to be the owner, so today the truth came out. But how many other people have been treated this way, without any way to prove their worth? How many people have been humiliated and turned away, simply because they did not wear designer suits or expensive jewelry?" Miriam Holloway had stopped her retreat toward the exit. She stood frozen, listening. Preston Whitmore finally looked up, shame evident on his face. The passengers who had been filming lowered their phones, slightly, the entertainment value of the situation giving way to something more uncomfortable. Self-reflection. Keanu checked his watch. The board meeting in Tokyo had started 2 minutes ago. His phone continued to buzz with urgent messages from executives wondering where their chairman was. He picked up the tablet and pressed a button to initiate a video call. Within seconds, a conference room appeared on the screen, filled with well-dressed executives seated around a long table. They looked up with surprise and relief when they saw Keanu's face. "Mr. Reeves," one of them said. "We were getting worried. Is everything all right?" Keanu positioned the tablet so the camera could capture the scene around him, the scattered ashes on the floor, the stunned passengers, Victoria standing pale and trembling nearby. "I apologize for the delay," he said calmly. "I am currently at the VIP lounge in Phoenix, dealing with an unexpected situation. Please begin the meeting without me. I will join shortly." He paused. "Also, please add a new item to the agenda. We will be conducting a comprehensive review of customer service standards across all locations. What I have witnessed today suggests we have significant problems that need immediate attention." The executives on the screen exchanged concerned glances but nodded in agreement. "Understood, Mr. Reeves. We will await your arrival." Keanu ended the call and lowered the tablet. The lounge remained silent. Everyone waited to see what would happen next. Victoria stood at the center of the room, surrounded by the ashes of the documents she had burned, the black card she had confiscated still in her pocket, and the ruins of her career scattered around her feet. Keanu lowered the tablet and turned to face Victoria directly. The video call with Tokyo had ended, but the weight of what had just happened hung heavy in the air. "Throughout my career," he said quietly, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had learned hard truths through experience, "I have come to believe that people deserve to be judged by their actions, not by their appearance." He gestured down at his worn hoodie and faded jeans. "I dress simply because I believe that real value does not come from clothes or cars or watches. It comes from how we treat each other, especially how we treat people who we think cannot do anything for us." Victoria stood trembling, her earlier confidence completely shattered. Tears had begun forming in her eyes. "But you," Keanu continued, his tone more sad than angry, "you created an entire system built on the opposite belief. And worse, you enforced it with arrogance. For nearly 5 years, you have been deciding who deserves respect based on nothing more than fabric and labels." He held up the tablet, displaying the complaint records. 14 complaints in 2 years, Victoria. Each one was documented. Each one was sent to HR. Each one triggered a review process that required your signature acknowledging you had read and understood the concern. His voice softened slightly. Do you know what that means? It means you had 14 opportunities to change. 14 moments when someone told you that your behavior was hurting people. 14 chances to look in the mirror and ask yourself if maybe, just maybe, you were wrong. He lowered the tablet. You ignored every single one of them. Victoria's composure finally broke completely. Her shoulders shook as tears streamed down her face. Mr. Reeves, please, she sobbed. I have a family. I have a mortgage. My son is in college. I cannot lose this job. Please, I am begging you. I am so sorry. I did not know who you were. Keanu listened to her words, and for a moment, something like compassion flickered across his face. But it was quickly replaced by something more resolute. You are sorry because you got caught, Victoria, he said gently but firmly. Not because you regret what you have been doing for years. He stepped closer to her. That retired teacher you refused to serve last March. She had a family too. She probably spent decades helping students, and when she finally retired and bought herself a first-class ticket to celebrate, you made her feel worthless because her dress was not expensive enough. Victoria's crying intensified. The software engineer you humiliated in July, he had dreams too. He had probably worked incredibly hard to reach a point where he could afford to fly first class, and you demanded he prove his income like a suspect in a crime. Keanu's voice remained steady, without anger, but each word landed with undeniable weight. The nurse you turned away in November. She had bills to pay too. She had just finished a 12-hour shift saving lives, and you told her that the lounge was not for people like her. Do you have any idea how those words must have felt to someone who had spent all night caring for 6 strangers? Victoria could not meet his eyes. She stared at the floor, at the ashes of the documents she had burned with such theatrical satisfaction just minutes earlier. Keanu turned to Officer Douglas. Please collect Ms. Ashford's employee badge and access keys, he said calmly. The security officer nodded and stepped forward. Victoria, still crying, fumbled in her pocket and produced the items with shaking hands. She also withdrew the black card she had confiscated earlier and held it out toward Keanu. He took the card and slipped it back into his pocket without comment. Victoria Ashford, Keanu announced, his voice clear enough for everyone in the room to hear. You are suspended from your position effective immediately, pending a formal review by the disciplinary board. Victoria's knees buckled. She grabbed the back of a nearby chair to keep from collapsing. The board will convene within 48 hours to make a final determination, Keanu continued. However, given the 14 documented complaints in your file and the events of today, which have been recorded by multiple witnesses and broadcast to thousands of viewers online, I want to be honest with you. You should prepare for the most likely outcome. Please, Victoria whispered. Just one more chance. I will change. I promise I will change. Keanu looked at her for a long moment. I already gave you 14 chances, he replied softly. Every complaint was a chance. Every HR notification was a chance. Every time you signed that acknowledgement form was a chance to reflect and do better. He shook his head slowly. A 15th chance will not come, Victoria. Not because I am angry with you, but because if I give you another opportunity after everything that has happened, I would be telling every customer who walks through those doors that their dignity does not matter, that they can be humiliated and mistreated as long as the person doing it apologizes afterward. He paused. I cannot send that message. I will not send that message. Victoria nodded weakly, tears still streaming down her face. Whatever fight she had left seemed to drain out of her completely. Keanu turned to address the other passengers in the lounge. His gaze moved across the room, resting briefly on Miriam Holloway, who had retreated to a corner and was trying very hard to be invisible. Then on Preston Whitmore, who was staring intently at his shoes. To those of you who applauded when I was being humiliated, Keanu said, his tone not accusatory but thoughtful. I do not blame you. Miriam flinched visibly. You saw a man in casual clothes being accused of fraud by a confident authority figure. You saw other well-dressed passengers nodding in agreement. You made a quick judgment based on appearances, and you joined what seemed like the winning side. He let those words settle. But I want you to think about something. Today, I happen to be the owner of this airline. So the truth came out. But what about tomorrow? What about the next person who walks in here wearing worn jeans and an old hoodie? He looked directly at Miriam. What if that person is a doctor who just finished emergency surgery and did not have time to change? What if they are a grieving family member rushing to say goodbye to a loved one? What if they are simply someone who, like me, does not believe that expensive clothes define human worth? Miriam could not meet his eyes. She looked away, her face flushed with shame. Keanu turned to Preston. You said I did not belong here because of my sneakers. But belonging is not about shoes or suits or handbags. It is about being human. And every human being who purchases a ticket on this airline belongs, regardless of what they are wearing. Preston nodded silently, unable to speak. What would happen? Keanu continued, addressing everyone, if tomorrow you were the one being judged. If someone looked at your clothes on a bad day and decided you did not deserve respect, how would you want bystanders to respond? The question hung in the air. No one answered, but the discomfort in the room was palpable. Keanu let the silence stretch for a moment, then turned and gestured for Chloe Martinez to approach. The young woman stepped forward hesitantly, clearly unsure why she was being singled out. You were the only person in this room who tried to stop what was happening, Keanu said to her. Even though it meant contradicting your supervisor. Even though it could have cost you your job. Chloe's eyes widened slightly. That takes courage, Keanu continued. The kind of courage that is far too rare. He looked at her directly. Chloe, I would like you to serve as the interim VIP lounge manager for this location, effective immediately. The position will become permanent after a 30-day evaluation period, assuming you continue to demonstrate the values you showed today. Chloe's mouth opened in surprise. Mr. Reeves, I do not know what to say. Thank you. I will not let you down. Keanu smiled gently. I know you will not, because you understand something that Victoria never learned. Every person who walks through those doors has a story we do not know, a life we cannot see, a worth that has nothing to do with their clothing. He turned back to the tablet and began typing. I am also implementing several changes that will apply to all Pacific Horizon Airlines locations, effective immediately. Chloe pulled out her phone to take notes. First, Keanu announced a new service philosophy called Dignity First. Every passenger will be treated with equal respect regardless of their appearance, clothing, or perceived economic status. He continued typing as he spoke. Second, employees are prohibited from making judgments or comments based on a passenger's attire, luggage, or external presentation. Third, an anonymous feedback system will be established allowing customers to report any discriminatory treatment directly to corporate leadership. Chloe typed rapidly, capturing every word. Fourth, surveillance cameras will be installed at all customer interaction points to ensure accountability. Fifth, mandatory training on unconscious bias and respectful service will be required for all staff. And sixth, employee performance reviews will now include specific metrics related to equitable treatment of all customers. He looked up from the tablet. These are not suggestions. These are requirements. Any violation will result in immediate disciplinary action. The passengers in the lounge watched in stunned silence. What had started as entertainment had transformed into something far more significant. They were witnessing the birth of a new corporate policy, born directly from this moment of confrontation. Keanu walked over to the pile of ashes on the marble floor. He knelt down and carefully gathered some of the blackened fragments into his hand. Chloe, he said. Please collect what remains of these documents. Have them preserved and framed. Chloe looked puzzled but nodded. Of course. Where would you like them displayed? At our corporate headquarters in Phoenix, Keanu replied. In the main lobby, where every employee and visitor will see them. He stood up, the ashes still in his palm. The inscription should read, "The cost of assumptions." He looked down at the dark fragments. These ashes will remind everyone who sees them that prejudice destroys more than just paper. It destroys trust. It destroys dignity. It destroys the basic human connection that should exist between people. He carefully handed the ashes to Chloe, who accepted them with a sense of reverence. Officer Douglas and Officer Perry had remained silent throughout, watching the scene unfold. Now Keanu turned to them. Officers, please escort Ms. Ashford from the premises. Ensure she is able to collect any personal belongings from the staff area. The two security officers moved to either side of Victoria, who had stopped crying but looked utterly defeated. Victoria, Keanu said, and she turned to look at him one last time. Her eyes were red and swollen, mascara streaked down her cheeks. I hope you use the coming days to reflect, he said gently. Not on the job you lost, but on the people you hurt, that retired teacher, that software engineer, that nurse, and however many others never bothered to file a complaint because they assumed no one would listen. Victoria nodded weakly. If you can truly understand the pain you caused, Keanu continued, then maybe something good can come from today. Not for your career here. That is over, but for who you might become afterward. Victoria's lip trembled. She seemed to want to say something but could not find the words. Finally, she simply nodded again and allowed the officers to guide her toward the exit. At the door, she paused and looked back one more time. The lounge she had managed for nearly 5 years. The space she had guarded with such fierce pride. The domain where she had reigned as the ultimate judge of who belonged and who did not. Then she turned and walked through the doors, disappearing from view. The room remained silent for a long moment after she left. Keanu checked his watch. He was now significantly late for his board meeting in Tokyo, but some things were more important than schedules. He looked around the lounge one final time. The passengers. The scattered ashes on the floor. Chloe standing with her phone and her notes, ready to begin her new role. The video of the incident had continued spreading while all of this unfolded. 50,000 views. 60,000. The numbers climbed steadily as the story was shared across platforms and picked up by news outlets. Comments flooded in from around the world. This is how a real leader handles injustice. He stayed calm through everything. Incredible. Karma came for that manager so fast. Dignity first. What a perfect name for the policy. But Keanu was not thinking about the video or the viral moment. He was thinking about the 14 people who had filed complaints. The ones who had been brave enough to speak up, and all the others who had suffered in silence, walking away from the lounge feeling diminished and disrespected. He hoped that what happened today might prevent even one future passenger from experiencing that same humiliation. That alone would make everything worthwhile. 6 months had passed since that Tuesday afternoon in Phoenix. The framed display now occupied a prominent position in the main lobby of Pacific Horizon Airlines headquarters. Behind protective glass, carefully preserved ashes rested on a bed of dark velvet. The remains of a boarding pass and an official board meeting invitation, documents that had once been worth thousands of dollars but were now priceless in a different way. A brass plaque beneath the display read, "The cost of assumptions." Below that, in smaller letters, human worth is not measured by clothing. Every customer deserves respect. Every new employee at Pacific Horizon Airlines was required to stand before this display on their first day. They would hear the full story of what happened in the VIP lounge, and they would understand why the company now operated under a philosophy called Dignity First. Hundreds of visitors came each month just to see the memorial and take photographs. It had become something of a pilgrimage site for people who had experienced similar judgment in their own lives. The Dignity First policy had transformed the airline from the inside out. More than 12,000 employees completed mandatory training on unconscious bias and respectful service. Anonymous feedback systems collected over 3,400 customer reviews in the first 6 months alone, with 89% reporting positive experiences. Surveillance cameras were installed at all 47 VIP lounges nationwide. The results spoke for themselves. Customer satisfaction rates increased by 31%. Pacific Horizon Airlines received the Travel Excellence Award for Best Customer Service, beating out competitors who had held the title for years. Industry analysts pointed to the incident as a turning point, proof that treating customers with dignity was not just ethically right, but also good for business. The ripple effects extended far beyond one airline. 15 other carriers adopted their own versions of the Dignity First policy. Business schools at Harvard and Stanford incorporated the case into their leadership curricula. The Harvard Business Review published an in-depth analysis titled Leadership Through Humility. The Keanu Reeves approach, examining how a single moment of quiet dignity had sparked industry-wide change. But the most remarkable transformations happened to the individuals who had been at the center of that fateful day. Victoria Ashford's termination became official 48 hours after the incident, just as Keanu had indicated. The disciplinary board reviewed the evidence, 14 prior complaints, video footage viewed by millions, witness statements from passengers and staff, and reached their unanimous decision. She was dismissed with cause, forfeiting all benefits under the company's policy for serious violations. Keanu had declined to pursue criminal charges for the destruction of his property. When asked why by the board, he simply said that punishment was not the same as justice, and that he hoped Victoria would find a better path forward. The months that followed were brutal for Victoria. The video of the incident had exploded across every social media platform, eventually reaching over 15 million views. Her face became synonymous with arrogance and poor judgment. Strangers recognized her in grocery stores. Neighbors whispered when she walked past. Friends she had known for years stopped returning her calls. No company in the service industry would hire her. Her resume, once impressive, now carried an invisible scarlet letter. Recruiters who searched her name found thousands of articles and comments describing what she had done. One hiring manager told her bluntly that bringing her on board would be a public relations disaster. Her marriage strained under the pressure. Her husband Daniel tried to be supportive, but the financial stress of her unemployment, combined with the social shame, created tensions that tested their relationship daily. Their son, at college, faced teasing from classmates who had seen the video. Their daughter in high school came home crying after someone shared the clip in a group chat. Victoria spent many sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment she had touched the lighter to that boarding pass. Such a small action. Such enormous consequences. But somewhere in the darkness of those 4 months, something began to shift. She found herself thinking about the 14 complaints, not as abstract numbers in a file, but as real people with real feelings. The retired teacher, the software engineer, the exhausted nurse. She remembered their faces now, faces she had barely glanced at when they stood before her, faces she had dismissed because their clothes did not meet her standards. Victoria began searching for them. It took weeks of effort, following up on old complaint records, reaching out through mutual connections, writing letters that might never be answered. But slowly, one by one, she managed to contact 8 of the 14 people she had wronged. She did not ask for forgiveness. She did not make excuses. She simply apologized, taking full responsibility for how she had treated them, acknowledging the pain she had caused, and asking nothing in return. Some of them were angry, some were cold, some refused to respond at all. But one response changed everything. Margaret Chen, the retired teacher who had been refused service in March of the previous year, wrote back with words that Victoria did not deserve but desperately needed to hear. I spent 35 years teaching children that mistakes are opportunities for growth. I would be a hypocrite if I did not believe the same applies to adults. Your apology tells me that you have begun to understand something important. Now use that understanding to help others. That will be your real apology to me. Victoria read the letter a dozen times. Then she sat down and wrote to Keanu Reeves. Her letter was not a request for her job back. She knew that door was permanently closed. Instead, it was a genuine expression of the journey she had been on since that day in the lounge, the sleepless nights, the self-examination, the apologies to people she had wronged, the slow, painful realization that her entire system of judging human worth had been fundamentally broken. She did not expect a response. She did not deserve one. A week later, her phone rang with a call from Pacific Horizon Airlines, not from Keanu, but from the Vice President of Human Resources. Ms. Ashford, the VP said, "We are not calling to offer you a position with our company. That will never happen. But someone has suggested that you might benefit from a different kind of opportunity." The VP explained that Keanu had read her letter and forwarded it with a single note attached. "She seems ready to learn. Perhaps she can help others." The opportunity was at a place called Phoenix Dignity Center, a nonprofit organization that provided services to homeless individuals and families facing economic hardship. They needed someone to help their clients navigate bureaucratic systems, access social services, and rebuild their lives. The work paid a fraction of what Victoria had earned as a VP lounge manager. The office was cramped. The hours were long. The clients were people she would have dismissed with a single contemptuous glance just 6 months earlier. Victoria accepted immediately. Her first day at the center was overwhelming. She met a man named Robert wearing a torn jacket and carrying his belongings in a plastic bag. He needed help applying for housing assistance. Victoria sat with him and helped him fill out the forms, and in the process learned that he had been a professor of literature at a respected university before a series of personal tragedies had led to his current situation. She met a woman named Grace who looked exhausted and worn, her clothes faded and patched. Grace was trying to reconnect with her children after losing custody during a period of homelessness. Victoria discovered that Grace had spent 20 years as a registered nurse before being forced to quit to care for her dying mother. Every day brought new faces and new stories. Every story demolished another piece of Victoria's old belief system. The assumptions that had once seemed so reliable, so obvious, so self-evidently true, crumbled in the face of actual human beings with actual human lives. One evening, a colleague asked Victoria how she was adjusting to the work. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I used to think I was good at judging people. Turns out I was only good at judging their clothes. I never saw the people wearing them." Meanwhile, at the VIP lounge in Phoenix, a very different transformation had taken place. Chloe Martinez had completed her 30-day evaluation period and was officially promoted to VIP lounge manager. At 26 years old, she became the youngest person in company history to hold the position. Her salary increased by 45%, but more importantly, she now had the authority to shape how passengers were treated in her space. She implemented her own philosophy alongside Dignity First. Look customers in the eyes, she trained her staff. Not at their clothes. The eyes will tell you what they need. The clothes will tell you nothing useful. Under her leadership, the Phoenix VIP Lounge achieved the highest customer satisfaction ratings in the entire Pacific Horizon Airlines network. Passengers who had once felt anxious about being judged reported feeling welcomed and comfortable. Business travelers and casual flyers alike praised the atmosphere of genuine respect. Chloe was invited to speak at the International Aviation Service Conference, where she shared her experience with hundreds of industry professionals. That day in the lounge, she told the audience, "I learned that staying silent in the face of injustice makes you part of the injustice. I almost did not speak up. I was afraid of my supervisor. I was afraid of being wrong. I was afraid of losing my job." She paused. But someone was being hurt right in front of me. And I realized that my fear was not more important than his dignity. If no one speaks up when something wrong is happening, then the wrong thing will keep happening. It is that simple. Her speech was recorded and shared widely. The phrase "I almost did not speak up" became a touchstone for discussions about workplace ethics and bystander intervention. 2 months after the incident, Keanu Reeves appeared on a popular evening talk show. The interview segment was viewed over 28 million times across various platforms, making it one of the most watched conversations of the year. The host asked the question that everyone wanted answered. You could have exploded at her. You could have humiliated her the way she humiliated you. You had all the power in that situation. Why did you stay so calm? Keanu considered the question carefully before responding. Anger would have felt good for about 5 minutes, he said. But calm allowed me to create change that will last for years. If I had yelled and screamed, the story would have been about a famous person losing his temper. By staying calm, the story became about dignity and respect and how we treat each other. That is a much more important conversation. The host pressed further. But did you not feel angry at all? Of course I felt things, Keanu replied. I am human. When someone burns your documents and calls you a fraud and treats you like you are worthless, there is an emotional response. But I have learned over many years that my first emotional reaction is not always my wisest response. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is pause, observe, and choose how you want to handle a situation rather than just reacting. He leaned forward slightly. Here is what I keep thinking about, he continued. I happen to be the owner of that airline. So that day, the truth came out, and there were consequences. But most people who get treated poorly do not have that kind of power. They just have to absorb the humiliation and walk away. That is why systems matter. That is why policies matter. That is why we have to build structures that protect everyone's dignity, not just the dignity of people who happen to have power. The interview concluded with a statement that would be quoted in articles, shared on social media, and referenced in discussions about respect and human worth for years to come. They can burn your ticket. They can destroy your documents. They can confiscate your belongings. But they cannot burn your worth as a human being. That worth does not live in your wallet or on your clothes. It lives in how you treat other people, especially the people you think cannot do anything for you. The original video of the incident eventually reached 47 million views across all platforms. Over 500 news articles and analysis pieces examined various aspects of the story. Several schools incorporated the case into ethics curricula, using it to spark discussions about prejudice, assumptions, and the importance of treating others with dignity. A movement emerged organically on social media, with people sharing their own experiences of being judged unfairly based on appearance. Stories poured in from around the world. A surgeon who was denied entry to a restaurant because of his casual clothes after a long shift. A successful entrepreneur who was followed by security in a luxury store because of her ethnicity and simple attire. A grieving father in a wrinkled shirt who was treated with suspicion at a hotel while traveling to his mother's funeral. Each story reinforced the same lesson. You never know what someone is going through. You never know who they really are. You never know what battles they are fighting or what triumphs they are quietly carrying. The only safe assumption is that every person deserves basic respect. The story of Keanu Reeves and Victoria Ashford was never just about a burned boarding pass. It was about the assumptions we make every day, the quick judgments, the unconscious biases, The way we sort people into categories based on the most superficial signals, missing the complex human beings underneath. Victoria learned this lesson the hard way, through loss and shame, and the slow rebuilding of her understanding of human worth. Now she spent her days helping people who looked nothing like the polished passengers she had once served, and she discovered that they deserved just as much respect, perhaps more, because they had far less power to demand it. Chloe learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else matters more. She had been afraid to speak up, but she did it anyway, and that single moment of bravery changed the trajectory of her entire career. And Keanu demonstrated that true strength is not about domination or revenge. It is about using whatever power you have to make things better, not just for yourself, but for everyone who will come after you. The ashes behind the glass at Pacific Horizon Airlines headquarters continued to receive visitors. New employees stood before the display and heard the story. Tourists and travelers paused to read the inscription. Some took photographs. Some simply stood in silence, reflecting on their own assumptions and judgments. The plaque beneath the ashes asked a silent question to everyone who stopped to look. What assumptions are you making right now? About the person next to you on the subway? About the stranger in the coffee shop? About the customer or colleague or passerby who does not fit your expectations? And how much might you be missing by judging the clothes instead of seeing the person? Have you ever been judged unfairly because of how you looked? Have you ever made assumptions about someone else that turned out to be completely wrong? The answers to these questions do not live in any memorial or policy or training program. They live in the small daily choices we make about how to treat each other. They live in the decision to look someone in the eyes instead of scanning their outfit. They live in the courage to speak up when something wrong is happening. They live in the humility to admit when we have made mistakes and the determination to do better. The ashes of that boarding pass will remain behind glass for years to come, a permanent reminder that prejudice destroys more than just paper. But the real memorial is not in Phoenix. It is not in any building or frame or inscription. The real memorial is in every moment when someone chooses respect over judgment, dignity over assumption, humanity over hierarchy. That is the legacy of a Tuesday afternoon when a man in a worn hoodie walked into a VIP lounge and reminded the world that worth is not measured by what we wear. It is measured by who we choose to be.